I will start, if you may allow, introducing myself to the audience a little bit. My name is Kumuk. I'm residing in Turkey. I have bi-citizenship, Russian Federation and Turkish citizenship. And I'm the third generation representative of the genocide survivor family of a Circassian tribe, which had to flee to Turkey in 1864. I have been writing and researching on the history and the politics of the Caucasus, and I have some published articles and books. And today, therefore, I would be sharing with you the aftermath of the Republic of the Union of United Mountaineers of the Northern Caucasus. Indeed, we can go to the next slide, please. Right. Indeed, before starting with my first slide, I would like to make a strong emphasis on the sovereignty of the nations of the Northern Caucasus. I have been hearing very frequently in the most academic environments or in political environments or in diplomatic environments that the Northern Caucasus people had never formed a sense of state in the history and had never been sovereign and free in the history. However, I believe that's completely wrong because up until the invasion of the Russian Empire, which started in the 1769 and ended in 1864 officially, the North Caucasian people had lived always under sovereignty and as free people. And indeed, when you look at the Western travelers and researchers' books of that time, the Northern Caucasus is defined as terra incognita, unknown territory, just because that no foreigners were able to go to the penetrate to the deep in the countryside there. However, then with the defeat against Tsarist armies, officially from 1864 until the decline of the Tsar's regime in 1917, yes, the Caucasian people lived under the Tsarist regime of Russian Empire. Then, with the decline of the Tsarist regime, there was a chance for the North Caucasians to establish a modern state for the first time in the history. However, with the changing balances in the world, the end of the First World War, the Bolshevik revolution in Russia, and therefore the state which was established in 1918 did not last long and was declined by the Bolshevik troops in 1920. When the Bolsheviks ultimately had the power in the North Caucasus by the end of 1920, indeed the resistance movement led by the characters like Said Shamil, Uzun Haji, and Najmuddin Godsky continued until the end of 1921. However, by the end of 1920, officially with the Congress held in November in Temirhan Shura in the North Caucasus, Stalin himself announced that the North Caucasus became a part of Soviet Socialist Republic, and they will have, as Lars also underlined, they will have the respect for traditions and the peculiarities of the region's people, but not their separation from Russia. Then, as all we know, that the Northern Caucasus, first of all, divided into two republics, the Dagestan and the Soviet Mountain Republic, and then the Soviet Mountain Republic has been divided into 7 different other autonomous regions as a part of divide and rule policy of the Soviet Union. Almost all of the anti-Bolshevik North Caucasian mountaineers left the North Caucasus to form a resistance movement and seek asylum in abroad. These political refugees gathered in several immigrant groups and tried to found a kind of government in exile and prepared the infrastructure of a possible North Caucasian state with the help of other anti-Soviet powers and Transcaucasian groups such as Georgians, Azerbaijanis, and Armenians. Some of the North Caucasian political refugees went to Istanbul at first, and some stayed in Tbilisi. However, when the Soviet power took place also in Tbilisi, then all their activities moved towards Europe of that time. We can go to the next slide. In Europe at that time, the Paris Peace Conference in Versailles was going on, and the League of Nations were gathered over there. So before the decline of the Northern Caucasus Republic, the Republic had already sent some representatives there to secure their independence, to secure their sovereignty. And with the Bolshevik invasion in the North Caucasus, those representatives couldn't have the chance to return back to their homeland and had to continue to their struggle in several countries in Europe. Indeed, that representation had a great job together with the Georgian, Armenian, and Azerbaijani representatives, namely Tokchubashiev from Azerbaijan, Aharonian from Armenia, and Chenkeli from Georgia. And they signed a petition and submitted to the Secretariat of the League of Nations in 10th of June 1921, defining that all Caucasian nations have got to aim to form a federation, a confederation, and they have the tendency to live together. That was a very important petition and appeal because they were creating a link between the West and the East world, as well as between the Christian and the Muslim world. According to the declaration, the problems between the Armenians and Turks were one of the main obstacles against establishing a union of Caucasian states, which the presentation just before us was underlining as well. Nevertheless, the atmosphere in Paris did not favor such small nationalities. The demands of the declaration were not realized, and the Caucasians were removed from the international political stage for some time again. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. Then the representatives in exile established the Union of Caucasian Mountaineers, Soyuz Gortsev Caucasia. That was the first formal political organization of the exiles, which is established in Prague, in Czechoslovakia in 1923. The infrastructure and the political climate in Czechoslovakia was allowing for such a formation, and Ahmet Kalikov from the side of Northern Caucasians was the chairman of, who was the chairman of first All Russian Muslim Congress in Russia at that time, and Murat Katarov, who is originally a Circassian, was the deputy of the Northern Caucasians within the Union of Caucasian Mountaineers organization. However, this organization then had a strong dispute, which was rose by the Cossack members of the union. And then there were some changes in the administrative structure of the union, and the impact publication of the Union, Kafkasy Goret, is the first example of the Caucasian revival in Europe, and has left us very good knowledge and information from that time. In the meantime, as you know, Turkey is accommodating a very huge bulk population of Northern Caucasians, the immigrants and survivors from the 1864 genocide. It is said to be that actually we're talking about some millions of Northern Caucasian people origin living in Turkey. And these are very effective and has got serious roles within the history of Turkish Republic from the very beginning. Thanks to this diaspora, some members of the Northern Caucasian Republic tried to find asylum in Turkey and tried to continue their struggle from Turkey. However, due to the relations between the Bolshevik government in Moscow and the Kemalist government in Turkey, these representatives didn't have the chance to perform freely and easily in Turkey. The Bolshevik government in Moscow put a lot of pressure on the Kemalist regime and did not allow the Northern Caucasian Republic representatives in Turkey to act freely at that time. So the activities of all anti-Bolshevik groups, not only Northern Caucasus, but all anti-Bolshevik groups and anti-Soviet groups were halted by the Kemalist regime at that time, and their leaders were forced to keep silent or leave Turkey. For example, the individual that you have seen on the picture, Alihan Sentemir, was one of them who tried to find ground in Turkey at first, but when he was deported with a train from Istanbul, it was the consulate of Soviet Empire who was waving his hand from behind. Then Promethe Front has been established among the mountaineers. Promethe Front was also like the Union of the other former Union of Caucasians. Promethe Front was consisting of other representatives of Caucasian nations as well. The mountaineers started to search new grounds for their independence movement, and the Caucasian Independence Committee first moved to Paris in 1926. In the meantime, General Joseph Pilsudski in Poland came to the throne, the power, and who accepted the anti-Soviet nationalist movement as natural allies. So this alliance attracted the immigrant groups to move to Warsaw by allocating a considerable sum of money for the activities of the immigrant against the Bolshevik regime. All non-Slavic people of the former Russian Empire, except the Armenians, had a chance to set up an anti-Bolshevik political organization in the Promethe group. The official publication of the Promethe was its periodical Promethe, the same name. It was first published in November 1926 in Paris. In addition, the organization supplied the financial means for the publication of several periodicals written for different nationalities, like Severny Kavkaz for the Northern Caucasians. The Promethe functioned through the Promethean Club of Warsaw, which also had branches in Paris, Helsinki, and other European capitals. However, the Northern Caucasians wanted something particular for their own, on their own. Besides, they kept being active in the Promethe group. Then in 1926, in November 1926, the Caucasian members in exile established the Free Caucasian Mountainese People's Party. This party is considered to be the first and only political party of the North Caucasians in exile. The party was initially established with the initiative of Mr. Said Shamil, and also other profiles like Ahmet Dalikov, Elmurza Bekovic Cherkassi, Beratli Baytugan, Adilbek Plati, and some others well-known profiles took active role within the party. The party published a periodical under the name Volny Gorsty in Russian language, which was later then changed into Gorsty Kavkaza, Caucasian mountaineers, and then finally Severny Kavkaz, Northern Caucasus by 1934. Party's program was declared on the 23rd of March 1927 and published in the periodical Volny Gorsty. In it, the party declared that its main aim was to establish a national territorial state, that is, a sovereign North Caucasian Federal Republic, in compliance with the basic principles drawn up by the Andy Congress in 1917, which Lars priorly mentioned. The party members clearly declared that their hostility towards the Russians, regardless the red or the white. While they're waiting for the war to re-establish their state, the North Caucasians started to discuss the structure of the state and difficulties posed by the unification. From the beginning, it became clear that the biggest challenge facing them was to create a single nation from several different nations making up the total population of the Northern Caucasus. Then again, as a result of the cooperation alliance with the other Caucasian nations like Georgians and Azerbaijanis, I again exclude the Armenians because they didn't want to participate within those alliances, and they preferred always to be the fifth arm of Russians within the Caucasus. The leaders of the national centers of the Northern Caucasus actively worked to set up a new organization, which is so-called the Caucasian Independence Committee, which is later so-called the PACT. The establishment of the Caucasian Independence Committee was proclaimed during the celebrations of the 10th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of the Caucasian States in Paris in 1928. Committee's basic project was to establish a common state structure covering the Caucasus as a whole in the form of a Caucasian confederation. Because of disputes between the Armenians and Muslim groups, the committee failed to declare its main program until 1934. In June 1934, the reconciliation among the Caucasians, and in July the same year, the Caucasian Independence Committee concluded the pact, and the representatives in Brussels signed the pact on the same day with a great alliance. Mr. Tunç, Mr. Çelik, and Mr. Tavsultan Shakman was the part who was signing this pact from the side of Northern Caucasian immigrants. The parties declared that the complete sovereignty of the nations of the Caucasus was their main concern, and the only possibility for attaining it was to establish a union geographically and economically. As it is a political form, the pact therefore proposed a Caucasian confederation in which the participating nationalities could preserve their national characters and territorial integrity. It is also emphasized that there was a place for the Armenian Republic in the confederation. The representatives of the three nations participating in the conference decided to form the Caucasian Confederation Council based on equal representation of their three national centers of Azerbaijan, Georgia, and in the Northern Caucasus. However, there was an opposition for the pact among the Northern Caucasians afterwards. The Northern Caucasian immigrant groups, some of them, opposed the pact by criticizing the pact of being too much Marxist approach, Marxist tendency. These opposition groups were led by some former leading profiles such as Murat Pedagogu, Abatiev, and Hatayev. However, the most powerful opposition came from one of the most prominent characters of the United Northern Caucasus movement, who played always very important roles during the establishment of the Union of Mountain Republic and also the other formations in exile. Mr. Haydar Bamat, who was the foreign affairs minister of the Cheese state. He established an opposition group, namely Caucasus, and started to publish a periodical with the same name, Caucasus. The group was differentiating from the pact with their strategic, tactics, and world outlook. The Caucasus group sought to make the Caucasus a Switzerland of the East by adopting a decentralized canton system used in that country. It worked to stimulate Armenian interests and to promote a careful and tolerant religious policy. They were defining themselves as nationalists and anti-Marxists. In their opinion, the pact was an arrangement of the Georgian Mensheviks who controlled the Promete, and it was just a Marxist setup. And a proper organization should have a program based on historical realities of the Caucasus, which avoiding imitation, the alliance example. We can go to the next slide, please. Therefore, we came to a point of crossroads between the clashing ideologies among the North Caucasian emigrant groups for the sovereignty and future independence of the Northern Caucasus. The turning point for the Caucasians came in 1934. For the last time, they tried to establish a confederation, at least on a paper. The contracting committee, however, was dissolved in 1935. Beyond that, the Armenians and Georgians separated themselves and began to work together, excluding the Northern Caucasians and Azerbaijanis. As a result, the Caucasus group advanced as a real organ representing the Northern Caucasian Confederation. After 1918, the second chance was knocking on the door. The mistakes of the past should not be repeated. The Caucasians had to establish close neighborly relations with Turkey and Iran, not like Georgians and Armenians, and even some Azeri immigrants who were provoked by the Russian groups. But the opponents of Caucasus blamed them leaving Kars, Ardahan, and Batum to Turkey and accused them for being very pro-Turkish. In return, Haydar Bamat accused the Caucasian immigrants who opposed the Turks or Turkey as overtly and covertly pro-Russian groups. Although Bamat correlated the moral and cultural values of the Caucasus with those of Turkey, he emphasized that his aim was not to remain under Turkish control. The Second World War was closer than ever. The Nazi-Soviet Pact of August 1939 dramatically dashed the expectations of Haydar Bamat and caused the dissolution of Caucasus Group. Then Mr. Bamat settled down in Switzerland and increasingly devoted himself to religion rather than political subjects. With the German occupation of Poland, the group Promete lost its financial support, and with the German invasion of Paris in 1940, publication of periodicals ceased it. For the North Caucasians in particular, the German occupation of Poland in September 1939 was the death of the idea of independence. Members of the Caucasian Mountain People's Party fought against the German troops together with the Polish army, but had to abandon Warsaw on 20th of September. The next slide, please. Then we reached to the Second World War years. The Nazi-Soviet Pact lasted in 1939, and the German army started to invade the Soviet territory. Some strategists of Nazi Party intended to make use of immigrants from the former Tsarist Russia and against the Soviet Republic. Nearly 2 million foreign volunteers joined to the German armed forces during the war. Caucasians had also taken an important place in the Freiwillige, Said Shamil, Haydar Bamat, Ali Hamkan Temir, and some leading profiles of that time was in very close contact with the Nazi regime to provide troops to Freiwillige. Although we cannot give an exact figure about the number of people, we can talk about an estimated number of about 40,000 people joined to the Edelweiss formation, which was particularly active in the northern Caucasus. And this group had very strong operations under the name Shamil in the regions of Grozny, Malgobek, and in Maikop. I must emphasize that these regions are very strategic regions for oil production. Nevertheless, many volunteers were openly slaughtered by the partisans and in some cases by the allies themselves, while most others were handed over to their respective former homelands in the end, like the case of the Grau massacre in most cases, as with those sent to the former Soviet Union. These volunteers would never be seen again. They were all executed or sent to the Gulag. We can go to the next slide. Then during the Cold War years, the leaders like Bamat, Chemoev, and others abandoned the struggle in dissolution. While they disappeared from the political arena, a small number of new emigres born and brought up in the Soviet regime, such as Abdurrahman Altarkhanov, Karcha, and Ramazan Strahov, continued to struggle against the communist regime together with the other emigre groups. Their works were neither political nor military, but covered only scholarly topics pertaining to the peoples of the Northern Caucasus in the Soviet Union. Over time, the North Caucasian immigrant movement, in parallel with American-Soviet rapprochement and the natural passing of the leading figures, these movements came to an end at the end. These devoted leaders and fighters, however, left behind volumes of printed material and outlining an extensive blueprint for a possible unified Northern Caucasians in the future. Besides the activities of these immigrant groups as a diaspora initiative, the United Caucasus Association was founded in Istanbul in 1951. Besides the leading characters of the Caucasian diaspora from 1864 genocide, the immigrant groups from the Republic of 1989 and 1918, Mr. Kotok, Mr. Jabal, and Mr. Baytugan, and Mr. Namitok played important roles in the activities of this organization as well. While everybody was thinking that Soviets would never decline and the dreams of sovereignty of the Northern Caucasian people would remain as a dream, we had the miracle and the bell started to ring announcing the decline of the Soviet regime. During those days, the Northern Caucasian people gathered the assembly of the mountain peoples of the Caucasus in Abkhazia's capital, Sukhumi, on the 25th and the 26th of August 1989. And on 13th and 14th October 1990, the assembly held its second congress in the capital of Kabardino-Balkaria, Nalchik. Then on the 4th of November in 1990 in Nalchik, the federation named as Confederation of Mountain Peoples of the Caucasus. 16 nations of the Caucasus joined to the confederation. The assembly elected Mr. Shenigov as the president and one vice president from each nation. Yusuf Soslanbekov was the chairman of the Caucasian parliament, and Sultan Soslaniev was appointed the head of the Confederation's military department. Following the outbreak of war as Georgian troops entered Abkhazia in August 1992, the Confederation held its 11th parliamentary session in Grozny and raised thousands of volunteers from the Northern Caucasian Republics of Russian Federation, which half of them reportedly came from Chechnya. And the diaspora organizations, especially from Turkey, have also supported the Confederation movement, and a couple of hundreds of volunteers have gone mainly from Turkish diaspora to the war to support Abkhazians against Georgians. The success of the Confederation forces on the battlefield became a stimulation for the hope for another independence win in the Northern Caucasus. The first Russian-Chechen war started under this atmosphere. The Chechen leader, Johar Dudayev, called the Northern Caucasian republics for an entire resistance against the Russians in the Caucasus. However, his call was responded with a complete silence from the other republics. Confederation of Mountain Peoples of the Caucasus could not show the same solidarity in the case of Chechen war. On the contrary, the presidents of the other autonomous republics of the Northern Caucasus wrote an appeal to Kremlin to suppress the Chechen uprising immediately, with the fear that the wind may spread over the whole Caucasus, which will put their throne in danger. Even the Chechen heroism and victory of the First Chechen War could not trigger any nationalist aspiration in the other nations of the Northern Caucasus. With the changing balance of powers in Moscow, Kremlin regained the power and eliminated all possible future uprising threats by placing loyal natives at critical governmental positions in the Northern Caucasus. Instead of aspirations towards a unity, the micro-nationalist aspirations were encouraged, with the strong impact of Kremlin as a part of divide and rule policy. The focus shift in the Chechen cause from the nationalism towards Wahhabism during the second war between the years 1999 and 2009, and the inevitable defeat brought along another silence in the quest of formation of an independent Caucasian state in the Northern Caucasus. So I try to respect my time. I hope I didn't pass over the time which is reserved for me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Now we have some time for questions. So if you have any questions, please also be clear on whether you're asking the questions to which persons you're directing your questions. Please.
Maybe just to make a comment on the small comment.
Okay.
First of all, thank you very much. I just listened to the beginning of the first presenter, and I apologize that I was not present throughout the whole presentation. And just to comment the last developments which we just heard about the happenings in the Georgian part of Abkhazia, the actions which were heavily supported by the Russia, and the happenings in the Abkhazia in the beginning of 90s of the 20th century caused, in our understanding, the events unfolding in Chechnya, because they saw the same people who were fighting against the Georgians in Abkhazia, the Chechenian or the North Caucasus Federation representatives, that turned against Russia. So it was absolutely logical what has happened. It was a continuation of the same policy which Russia had and used against Georgia. This I wanted just to clarify and comment on that.
Thank you. Mr. Kumuk or Lars, do you have any comments on that? Or
no. Maybe Jem has.
Yes, I would like to have a comment on that, if I can hear correctly, because sometimes the voice is reaching to me very metallic. Yes, the Russian interference with the Georgian-Abkhazian conflict is a little bit, how to say, flu. If I may, I mean, according to my interpretation and what I've witnessed during that time, I can say that at the beginning of the war, Russian administration, Russian government, encouraged the government of Tbilisi to invade Sukhum. We know very well that Shevardnadze, who was the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Soviet Union, was in very close relations with the government in Moscow. However, then the balances changed sometime somewhere during the war, and yeah, Russia has changed the side and started to support the Caucasian Confederation. Therefore, indeed, yeah, this question brought a very, how to say, good opportunity to emphasize something. The small nations of the Caucasus has always been experiencing the same destiny for being the puppet of bigger nations. Therefore, when the English changed sides, when the America changed sides, when the Russia changed sides, the relations in between the Caucasian nations are changing. Therefore, I don't want to, how to say, put more comment on what Russia did at that time or what has been doing till then. But I would like to emphasize one thing for all Caucasian nations, that there is a very good lesson to be taken out of this evil to learn the good. So also during my presentation, you might pay attention that I was always emphasizing that some Turkish interference, Russian interference, religious interferences, etc. But one thing I must emphasize, it is clear from the historical realities that if Caucasian nations would not form one unity, also in the future, even today's so-called Caucasian sovereign republics would give farewell to their sovereignty. And either they would remain as puppet republics of the greater nations, or they would be again experiencing the invasion, which we also have seen a very good example between the Russian-Georgian war related to South Ossetian case. Therefore, I find a very good lesson out of that, showing to the Caucasian nations to form the necessity to form a unity for the future.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Any more questions?
Maybe just again my reply. I just not want to usurpate the whole time, but yeah, I fully agree. The unity would be perfect, and the cooperation in the region is much more than desirable. But in our understanding, and I think we should agree that all those entities during the Soviet time were created in the first place exactly to cause the reaction which we have seen in the beginning of the 90s. And this is not only Georgia. I mean, in all the post-Soviet space, you see that even in this very difficult time on the beginning of 90s, when the Russia itself was in a very difficult situation, they have managed to instigate those ethnic conflicts, and they were so much well prepared that the things just started to move on their own, without at the beginning with the very little support, and afterwards with quite a strong support of Russia. So these ethnic conflicts were brought to the boiling point in the beginning of to the time of the beginning of the 90s, and therefore it was very easy for Russia to just launch the projects, and it has worked. Unfortunately, it has worked. We were not wise enough to see at that time what they were doing, and absolutely true. Fortunately, we were in a situation where we were. I fully agree. The cooperation in the region has no alternative. We have to build unity in our region, and we have to move forward. But given circumstances, only give the leverage to the Russia again. And if the situation stays like it is right now, then Russia will maintain this leverage uninterruptedly for continuous for a longer time. And of course, we'll try to stop the development of our region by these actions which Russia is doing in the region since the beginning of 90s. I'm sorry for taking too much time. I had to say this because, yeah.
Thank you. So I'll ask you.
I would like to correct one thing.
Can I don't want to be just a short comment? Yes.
I don't want to make strong Russia-phobia statements. I mean, one thing I would like to emphasize over there, sovereignty, freedom, confederation style, whatever it is. One thing, we understand that the big players like Turkey and Russia is manipulating the region, has got the power and potential to manipulate the region. So we shouldn't fall into the same mistake in the future again. In order to exist, sovereignty is not the only option. Some federal solutions could still be on the table to discuss. Therefore, what I would like to emphasize, both for Russians, for Turkish, for Georgians, Armenians, and Northern Caucasian nations, let's leave the chauvinist feelings aside and sit around the table to form a multi-flower garden with different smells and beautiful colors. Caucasus has got this potential. Instead of turning this beautiful land into bloodshed pool.
It sounds great. If it would be possible, of course. It sounds wonderful, but the different reality on the ground. But no, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there are no further questions, I would like to thank you for this very exciting discussion. I would like to thank our two presenters for excellent presentations, and I will give the word to Karina for some final words.